And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country. And welcome into Juckonbucks. Thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate you all so much. Little update. Gigi the dog doing very well. We've got movement in both hind legs. Mom coming out of her surgery, also doing very well. Thank you all for the well wishes. Hey, it's Juck. Probably not going to go too long today on the show because I'm a little backed up on the news. Didn't get a whole lot done today, but I did want to show you a new trick that I learned. I can now share my screen, which is really much better and much easier for me to get some information on the screen than doing screenshots and sending them to the computer and then pulling them up. It was a big hassle. So a cool new trick I learned, and the Buckeyes have 6 preseason All-Americans, according to the AP, more than any other team, as Donovan Jackson and Emeka Egbuka have made first-team offense. First-team defense includes Denzel Burke, Caleb Downs, second-teamers Trey Henderson, and Ty Leak. So congrats to them. On3 also came out with a first-team preseason All-American or All-Rookie team, freshman, true freshman. And on the defense, we've got some familiar names. Justin Scott, of course, was a commit to the Bucks and got flipped to Miami. An interesting story about that. Coy Parrish down at safety, who committed to Minnesota. I really wanted him, and I thought we were going to have a good shot to get him there for a second. Didn't end up being so. Sammy Brown, the Clemson linebacker out of Georgia. We're looking for him to make a big impact this year, and that's going to be fun to watch because he is one real true physical specimen. Guy puts up crazy numbers in the gym, super fast, a really elite athlete. On the offensive side of the ball, of course, we got J.J. Smith. And I was thinking earlier today, could you imagine? You look down at running back, you see Jordan Lyle. Tony Alford lost him late when Miami came in with the big offer. I don't really blame Tony a ton for that. I do blame him for not having a proper backup plan. Jordan Seaton over there on the right of Jordan Lyle, Colorado tackle. Battle we thought was going to be between Tennessee and Ohio State at the end, and Colorado was out of it, and then he went ahead and signed to Colorado. And Jeremiah Smith could very well be on that Miami Hurricanes team with Jordan Lyle, with Justin Scott. And that would really be something, wouldn't it? Jeremiah Smith on Miami would be very, very scary right now with what they got going on. Thank goodness he's on our team, but we've got some funny news coming out of Miami as John Ruiz, who's the guy who's been footing the bill for these massive bags that Justin Scott and guys like that got to flip off to Miami. His business is apparently going under. At least that's what he filed in his documents to the SEC. So he's in dire straits. I'm guessing that well is going to dry up for the University of Miami, and they're going to have to find someone new to foot the bill for those big flip bags that they carry. And that's pretty funny. So, as you know, and I've said it before, I don't like the fact that they went straight from 4 teams to 12 teams with the playoff. And the only reason I don't like it, I love the playoff. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be amazing. But for me, the entire season was kind of like a long playoff. You lost a game, and the odds are you might be out of that 4-team playoff. And rooting for a team like Georgia to lose late in the third quarter against a team like Missouri, incredibly exciting for me because if they lost, that means they might not make it to the playoff. And like that kind of thing I'm a huge hater, and I loved that. So I wish they'd have gone to 8, but whatever. We got a sweet playoff. What added to the regular season was conference expansion. Adding Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA even to the Big Ten, and adding Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC added, by my count, 25 extra games that are going to be compelling games that we would not have otherwise had to this season upcoming. And that's fantastic. And even games like, let's say Michigan goes out to Washington this year. Washington's not going to be very good this year, but that's a tough place to play to go up there. It's also a beautiful setting. It's a fun place to watch a game. It's really loud. So that becomes a compelling game to me, a game we otherwise wouldn't have had. Penn State out at USC, like these new games that we would not otherwise have had, just add to those Saturdays. And some Saturdays when I would look at the slate, we'd have it every year where there'd be like, man, there's only 3 games this weekend that are compelling games. This has added a ton more. And what I wanted to do is just go through and list the 25 games for me that I'm going to find most interesting this year. And of course, it'll change based on records and how things go. There will be games that pop up that all of a sudden didn't look like much now, but are compelling at the time. But just looking through, I wanted to rank my top 25 most interesting games. And of course, number one, and I'm going to start at one, is the game. And the game this year carries so much more with it than, I don't know. We've had so many versions of the game that are just incredibly exciting, nerve-wracking. This one in particular, their faux national championship, the new coach being so cocky, their fans thinking that they're not going to miss a beat. And depending on how their season goes, and ours, of course, heading into the game, it's going to change a lot. But I was thinking earlier, like, what if a lot of people think they're going to beat Texas now? There's been this kind of groundswell that they're going to be better than people think. And we got people picking them to beat Texas, and they're at home. Texas loses CJ Baxter. I think they got another running back hurt on top of it. Then you got the other side of that argument. They're 127th in returning production out of 134 teams. How could they possibly maintain it? It's going to be interesting. I'm in the camp that no, their defense is going to be really good. Their offense is going to be really stagnant. And against quality teams like Texas, they're not going to be able to get it done. But who knows? I could be wrong. It's not often we see a team that has so many. There's just a lot of questions for me when you got almost a whole new coaching staff. And I can't see them just continuing to have everything, running like it was. But should they beat Texas? Should they, they got Oregon at home too. Like, what if they beat them both? And we go into the game, like, imagine a normal games week, the game, that week leading up to it, the normal stress we feel that week. What if we're going into that game and they're good again? And we've really got it cooking, and everything riding on Ryan Day's shoulders. And like, that would be just unbelievable. Like, what a week that would be. Or conversely, what if they aren't that good and we're heading into that week and that game's tight in the first quarter? Either way, like, this version of the game, any way it goes, going to be one of the most exciting ever. Probably with the trend of college football's popularity, going to be an all-timer regular season for ratings. Like, everybody will want to watch this thing. But it's got to be number one, the number one most exciting game of the year. Number two, without a doubt, Ohio State heading out to Autzen Stadium to play that team out west. That game's so compelling for so many reasons. Oregon, it's their first big-time Big Ten game. When I was on with the Oregon podcaster Ryan Watts out at Sports Chat 503, he's a bit of an Oregon historian, and he said that's without a doubt the most exciting matchup they've ever had at Autzen Stadium. They're pumped. A lot of them are really cool to deal with. A lot of you are telling me, like, Chuck, you're not catching the right ones. Everyone I run into is very cocky. I get a couple of them here and there, but the ones we get here on the show that interact with us and in the comments, they're really cool and level-headed, just like us. But they're mostly really cool. We call those ones the Buckeyes, and some people get on me about that nickname. They don't like that, but those are just the ones that interact with the Juckeyes. But that game is going to be so interesting, and I've flipped my opinion on this game. I originally thought that was a coin flip game, and I was pretty nervous about it, and I still am. But we went into this spring with questions, and I think we're coming out of the fall, for me, with those questions mostly answered. And by the time we get to, that game, after the games that we see, I definitely think I'm going to be full of confidence that we're going to be able to handle that game. Of course, who knows? They might come out looking like gangbusters and change my mind. But at this point, I feel confident that we're going to win that game. We, Ohio State. Sorry, Duck Eyes. You got two really good looking rosters. The young up and coming coach. A lot of people resent the shine that he gets for being so unproven. It's definitely such a massive win to get them in the conference, though. And when you think about the fact that Washington and Oregon were like the throw-in piece, and USC and UCLA were the big win for the conference expansion of the Big Ten. It's looking right now like moving forward for at least the next, I don't know, 5 years that Oregon is going to be comparing them to USC. I can't see USC catching them anytime soon. They're the hot team. And I told you what their offensive coordinator, Will Stein, said. He goes into a house when they go recruiting, and so many of the kids that they talk to say, Oregon's been my favorite team. Like, if you're a kid from anywhere, your second team, aside from your hometown team, it seems to be the majority of them are saying it's Oregon. And they do a great job with everything they do. I mean, it appeals to children. You know what I mean? The whole Oregon brand very much appeals to children. I don't know if that's something I'd pat myself on the back about, but it's true. It appeals to the kids. Number 3, Ohio State at Penn State. I'm so mad that Ohio State did not protect this game. It is a fantastic game every year. Some people don't like to call it a rivalry, I think, because they feel like that, I don't know, like that's given Penn State some shine to admit that they're a rival. And Ohio State always usually wins the game. Of course it's a rival. It's absolutely a rival. I know that we've, won the game a whole lot in the last 10 meetings, but when you got a game like that that's that exciting, it's exciting for us. It's one of the ones we circle as, one of the 3 games this year on our schedule that are really competitive. Last year going into the game, there was a whole lot of people picking Penn State to win that game in Columbus. It's definitely a rivalry, and it should be treated as such. It should be protected. We should play it every year, but we're not gonna. This particular year, it's not going to be the whiteout, which sucks. I mean, it's nice that those whiteouts are tough. They add a couple points for sure for them, but I like that. It's what I mean. I love that about college football. I love playing in games like that. So that sucks, but it's still going to be an exciting game. And James Franklin and those guys are going to be in the playoffs, I think. I mean, for all the knocks on James Franklin, one thing he does do, similar to Ryan Day, is win the games that he's supposed to win. He's got a terrible record in big games, a terrible record against Ohio State and Michigan, but he wins the games he's supposed to. And when we look at their schedule this year, we know the West Virginia game going to be a good one. They start off with them. They got a couple Macs, then Illinois, UCLA, big one against USC, big one against Wisconsin, big one against Ohio State, then Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland. Finishing with that is a real godsend. So if they can get through that stretch of USC and Wisconsin and Ohio State, only losing one of those games, and I think they can, then it's a pretty easy coast to the playoffs. Even if they end up losing 2, Penn State with 2 losses, I think they're in. 4th most interesting game, Texas at Michigan. And this one's a huge game for both teams. Texas trying to prove they're still that dude, despite losing some key pieces, despite a couple of injuries they've had in camp, going into the SEC. And they certainly don't want to start their first SEC conference slate with an out-of-conference loss already on their record. So huge for them. Michigan going to throw absolutely everything at them to prove that they are still that dude. They know all the eyeballs in the country are watching. This one is enormous for them. It's enormous for both teams. So a hugely exciting game. I can't wait for it. Number 5, it's got to be the Ducks rolling into the Big House, Oregon's first big-time road game in the Big Ten. And I suspect when they're done, they're all going to laugh when they're asked about playing in the Big House because Autzen Stadium so much louder with half the people. Michigan leads this all-time series just 3-2 over Oregon. but the Ducks won the two most recent meetings in 2003 and 2007, which also means that the Ducks won their three last games they played Ohio State or Michigan. That's pretty interesting. I've not heard anybody bring that up. I've not heard them bring that up. I should not have given them that ammo. Now that I said that, we're going to hear it repeated. I should have just shut up. Maybe I'll cut that out. Number 6, Georgia at Texas. People have got Georgia and Alabama over this game. No. This Georgia and Texas is more compelling to me than Georgia, Alabama. You got Texas hosting Georgia, Texas's first big time game in the SEC hosting Georgia. And we remember what happened the last time these two met. Do you remember? I'll play it for you. Texas beat Georgia in that Sugar Bowl a couple years back, and that was the last time that they had played since the 1980s. Two huge big-name programs, one of them the 8th ranked and lowest of the Blue Bloods in Texas. The other one, not a Blue Blood at all and quite a boring program. But you got two Heisman candidate quarterbacks in Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers. That last name, always difficult for me to say. Two teams that will definitely be in the playoffs without a doubt. What more could you ask for? And it's still weird to wrap my head around Texas being in the SEC. By the way, DKR Stadium sucks. Number 7. This is where Georgia and Alabama belong. This would not have been so high on my list a month ago, but as time's gone on, the more I've seen Kalen DeBoer operate, the more I believe in this guy. Listen, I always believed in Kalen DeBoer. When you asked yourself the hypothetical question at the end of last season, who would you pick if Ryan Day got fired? Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, who you going with? Most people said Lanning. I was on the Kalen DeBoer train in that hypothetical scenario. I didn't want Ryan Day fired, but in that scenario, I believe that Kalen DeBoer, and a lot of people don't factor this in, but those NAIA national championships he's won, the experience he's had as a head coach, you've been there, you've done that. And Kalen DeBoer says himself, the only difference is, everything's bigger and everything means more. But when you talk about the execution of the game, how you operate the team during games, all those things that we've watched Ryan Day kind of learn in these last 5 years, Kalen DeBoer's already got them. Dan Lanning going to go through the same thing Ryan Day has, learning that, all those growing pains. I want the experienced guy. The only thing that concerned me about Kalen DeBoer was recruiting. We hadn't seen much. His 2 cycles in Washington, nothing to write home about. They were a little bit lower than Washington's usual standard. But as a coach, fantastic. So give me that polished coach. The Ohio State machine can recruit. We can build the structure around him. And that was my choice. Then he goes to Alabama. And I immediately thought, because I hate Alabama, nope, not going to work. We watched a couple of the moves he made, including letting Sam Petito go and bringing in Courtney Morgan, his director of recruiting from Washington, to run the program there, the recruiting program. And this guy sucked at Washington. So I immediately said, this isn't going to work. Well, I was wrong. It's definitely going to work on the recruiting end. They're going to end up loving him here real soon because I think he's absolutely going to get that puppy rolling real quick. He is an excellent coach. Everybody loves what else I was knocking? They're all talking about the atmosphere's changed. They're playing music at practice. We're seeing videos come out. It's all lighthearted and everybody's having fun. Like, that's not going to work. It's going to work just fine. The only one who can run a program like Saban anymore in this day and age was Saban, and he's gone. You can't be that stodgy old guy anymore. It's just not going to work. They'll transfer out of your program if they're not having a good time. You got to let them have a little bit of fun. So Kalen DeBoer, absolutely going to work in this game. Georgia and Alabama, certainly going to be an exciting one. The Dogs beefed up in the portal, adding Travis or Trevor Etienne, whichever one. I don't know, the younger one. They got 3 good wide receivers in the portal. Colby Young, they're going to need because Ra Thomas just got himself kicked off the team. Remember, Kirby finally kicked someone off the team for the child cruelty charge. Also from the portal, a tight end from Stanford, very similar to Brock Bowers, got a skill set like Brock Bowers so they can keep those plays in the scheme. And it sure sounds like they're trying to buy themselves a super team out of the portal. But the number one offensive line in the country, without a doubt. Defensive line thought to be a bit of a weak spot this year, but at Georgia, that doesn't really happen. It's just the next guy up we don't know about yet. He'll be a superstar soon. The game's going to be amazing. I rank it above just barely our next game, which is quite exciting to me. Florida State at Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman going through some growing pains of learning how to be a head coach, the kind of stuff that we don't need to see from Kalen DeBoer. After they lost to Ohio State last year, they struggled in quite a few games down the stretch, but they're pretty loaded. And it's always fun to me seeing a big-time program come into Notre Dame Stadium. Florida State coming off their undefeated season, getting shunned from the playoffs. They lost a ton of talent, but they added a ton in the portal because Mike Norvell, it's not talked about much, but Mike Norvell lives in the portal. I'm pretty interested to see what happens this year with that because we've seen, people talk about Dion. Mike Norvell, for a big-time program like Florida State, he executes out of the portal more than anybody else. And we're talking big numbers. And when you looked at last year, when you looked at the bowl game when they played Georgia, the amount of guys that sat that game out and basically just kind of washed their hands of the program, it wasn't a good look to me. And I think that's the result of bringing in so many portal guys. I'm not saying it's a bad culture. It's just an unloyal culture. They don't really give a damn about Florida State. They're in there, then they're out of there. And I don't really like it. I think Mike Norvell is a bit of an overrated coach, but we'll see. This would be a good one. If he can go in and beat this Notre Dame team, it says something. Would you? This is short practice today. Will Howard. All right, number 9 for me is not going to make anybody else's top 10, but Alabama heading up to Wisconsin for that out-of-conference affair is so exciting to me. We never see a team like Bama come up north, especially up to Wisconsin north. Luke Fickell, year 2, he's got Phil Longo, and Wisconsin is now passing the ball. Obviously, Wisconsin is going to be out-talented. They got some issues. They got a lack of talent. They're just now getting around to Fickell, getting the whole family thing and toughening up. And his teams are tough. I don't know if they've quite got it yet. They certainly don't quite got it enough to get Bama. But what if Kalen DeBoer and his team start slow out of the gate? What if Jalen Mildew starts slow out of the gate? Shout out Uncle Lou. It could happen. It's going to be a crazy environment. And I'm really excited for it. If there could be a miracle, who knows? If they can keep it close heading into quarter number 4, by the time they get to jump around, Wisconsin's going to win that game. And I'm pumped for it. Number 10, another one, not going to be anywhere near anybody else's top list for most, but for me, absolutely Miami at Florida State. Since my childhood, this one's been appointment television for me. These two teams hate each other. Both these teams go to the portal a ton. I don't know if that's going to affect the amount of disdain that they used to have, but we're talking about two really talented teams, and somebody's got to win the ACC. So, I know a lot of people don't look at this game and think this is really exciting, but one of these two is going to be a playoff opponent for us potentially. And that's how I'm looking at these things in a lot of these cases. I think Miami's going to win the ACC. Both of these guys could potentially make the playoff, but this one's pretty exciting. One of these two is going to be in the playoffs. Number 11, Georgia at Ole Miss. If Georgia comes into this game and they still haven't lost by this point, that means they will have beaten two teams. Number 11, Georgia at Ole Miss. If Georgia comes into this game and they still haven't lost, that means they will have beaten 3 teams in the top 20 at this point. Ole Miss obviously been trending up for a while, but they've not been able to win the big one. They won 11 games last year. Can't beat Georgia or Alabama to save their life. It's obviously not going to be necessary for them to beat Georgia to get to the playoff. They're going to be in the playoff regardless, in my opinion. But at some point, they're going to have to beat one of the big boys. They're not being taken seriously by the Georgias and the Alabamas. But this season, this offseason, they loaded up on some big bodies in the portal, and they finally got the guys to compete in the trenches with Georgia. I think I'm going to call for the upset. I think Ole Miss is going to get it done at home and upset the Dogs. Number 11, Kansas State. Just a couple of the best coaches in the country in Chris Kleiman and Lance Leopold, who happen to coach in the state of Kansas. We've never been able to say that before. That alone, pretty cool. But I love watching K-State play. Somehow they can change head coaches and still play the exact same kind of ball. Smart, consistent, gritty, fundamental football. I love it. I love that you can be successful like that. And Kansas, much the same now under Lance Leopold. Guy's an absolute stud. I pull back when people start to put him in the top 5 on coaching lists, but total stud. He turned Wisconsin Whitewater into a power in Division III, took over Mount Union's dynasty and made his own. That's amazing. Mount Union ruled D3. That was an insane accomplishment. Did great at Buffalo, and now he's come to Kansas and turned them around from a doormat to an actual playoff contender. And I have got them in the Big 12 championship game this year. So we'll see, but I'm pumped for that game. Number 13, Clemson at Florida State. Now, Miami doesn't play Clemson this year, which means this is the only other massive game in the ACC this year. Clemson ended the season very hot. I still think that there's a chance that they could really get it together and even compete with Georgia in game 1. Number 14, Alabama at LSU. You know it'll be a night game. A night game, Alabama, LSU. You can't beat it. Brian Kelly in year 3 at home against Kalen DeBoer. When Bama and LSU match up, it has been must-see TV for the last 20 years now. Always a lot of fun. Usually big stakes, but now really big stakes for Brian Kelly. Because if he loses to Kalen DeBoer in year 1 of him at Bama, I think there's going to be a lot of LSU fans having a little bit of doubt about Kelly at the helm there. The Tigers hired away Blake Baker, defensive coordinator at Missouri, who did a really good job with Eli Drinkwitz. They're going to look a little better, I think, immediately on defense. They're going to seal up a little bit, enough to get by. Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback for LSU, got some experience. He's doing pretty good. Looked really good in the spring. He's looking good in camp. And they need to win this game. They can't be losing Alabama and Kalen DeBoer's first year. Number 15 for me is Miami and Florida. And I know a lot of people could not possibly care less about this game. But I think Miami's going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to win the ACC. And Florida is so interesting to me this year. You've got Billy Napier in year 3. And there's this weird thing going on where at first it was this back end of this Florida schedule is so incredibly difficult that Billy Napier's definitely going to get fired at the end of this year. And then it's kind of swung to, I actually think Billy Napier is going to get a pass for being abysmal this year because the schedule is so incredibly hard. It should probably have more to do with how they look and how they play and how they're coming together than the actual record. But if they play Miami close right off the rip, or if they potentially beat Miami, it could get pretty exciting. But these are the kind of storylines that are always fun to follow. Number 16, the battle of which team could fix their defense just a little bit more than the other in the offseason. LSU, USC, the two most, these teams last year, you had crazy offenses led by a Heisman Trophy winner at LSU and a former Heisman Trophy winner at USC, horrible defenses. It would have been an amazing watch last year. We'll see what it'll be this year, but it's going to kind of be a battle of whose defense got fixed a little bit more than the other. And that's what it'll come down to. You got two of the most hated coaches in college football in Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley, the most arrogant, pompous jerks in all of football, really. And should be a fun one. I wish they could both lose. LSU is 6-point favorite. We'll see how that one happens. I think I'll root for LSU in this one. Number 17, USC at Michigan. Michigan welcoming in USC in a big-time Big Ten matchup, which is just wild. Crazy to think about. But, you know, USC, I don't know, man. People are counting them out totally in this game. I think they might have a shot. Number 18, Red River. I made it clear how I feel about this rivalry yesterday. It's never that exciting to me. I don't know why. It's just not something I get too jazzed for. And that's why it's so low, despite some people calling it the most exciting rivalry in all of football. Totally disagree. I generally root for Oklahoma in the game. Actually, I usually root for the team who has a worse record at the time. But this year, I'll be rooting for Oklahoma because I don't like the way people are pumping up Texas like they're so much better than Oklahoma. And, I got this weird thing with Oklahoma. It's like, in one way, they get treated like the little brother of the series, and they don't deserve it because they are not, in fact, the little brother of the series. But in the other way, if they didn't have Texas's talent, they could never be anything. So when you compare it to the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, Michigan would kind of be like the Oklahoma in that sense, but we are the dad of the rivalry. So I don't know. I still root for Oklahoma. We'll see. Number 18, Tennessee at Georgia. Tennessee is making waves. Heupel's doing well. I think they're going to have a chance to win this game. I'm pretty excited about it. And I feel a little irritation. I made this list before the Sanders decision. And the Tennessee fans have been talking a lot of crap. So I feel a little irritated. I might not be rooting for them by the time this game rolls around. We'll see. Number 20, Oregon heading to Camp Randall to play the Badgers. And it's the second trip up to Wisconsin on my list. If there was a spot on Oregon's schedule that they were going to slip up and lose to someone that they shouldn't, this would be it for me. I don't think anybody's going to jump out and get them, right? Their first, go around in the Big Ten. They know everybody's out to get them, especially with the way they've been running their mouths. So they'll be prepared. But it's a weird place to play. We know that as well as anybody. It's a tough trip for them. It's a far trip. You never know. I got a lot of faith in what Luke's got going there. And I think they're going to get somebody this year. They're going to get somebody. They're going to get a big dog. Number 21, Missouri at Bama. One of Missouri's only big matchups of the entire year. They have an incredibly easy schedule, easier than Ohio State's. Let me pull this puppy up here. Missouri has Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vanderbilt. Well, that's not so hot. Then they got a game with Texas A&M, then UMass, then Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas. I mean, that is a trash schedule. That game against Texas A&M, okay, competitive game. Auburn is they're not going to be there yet. Alabama, definitely there. Oklahoma, I mean, maybe. Their win total this year is 7.5. Definitely not South Carolina, Mississippi State, or Arkansas. Like, this is a trash schedule for real. And Alabama, one of their only games. In fact, if they beat Alabama, they could potentially go undefeated, which would be unbelievable, but they could. Number 22, Utah and Kyle Whittingham head to Oklahoma State to take on Mike Gundy. These are number 1 and number 2 in the Big 12 odds to win the conference. Somebody out of these two probably going to make the playoffs. I usually like to root for Utah. Going to be tough for me here, though. Mike Gundy, one of the most underrated coaches in the country. And since 2010, Mike Gundy has won 10 or more games 8 times. Do you believe that? That's a wild stat. I don't think anybody really looks at him as a really great coach, but he is. That's incredible at Oklahoma State. And that's with Texas and Oklahoma in the conference. Number 23, Alabama at Tennessee, the game known by a day in a month, the third Saturday in October, Alabama and Tennessee. I love this game. It's a rivalry that has been kind of crappy for a while now, but before that and historically, it's been a great rivalry, something that I always get juiced for, and Alabama usually takes the juice away in the first 5 minutes of the game. We'll see if Tennessee can make it a game this year. The scenes from this game 2 years ago, one of the most incredible nights we've ever seen on TV, like in college football. The scene of them ripping down the goalpost, the orange, the fireworks, the lights, the rushing of the field, throwing the goalposts in the river. It was one of the best ever. I mean, top 5 just as far as like scenery, just looking at it in the history of college football to me. Maybe we can see it again. That would be amazing. And Josh Heupel had Tennessee up to number 1 after that game. Number 24, Penn State at USC. Penn State, pretty easy schedule themselves this year. This is one of their only games that, they got a chance to lose. It's not an easy trip heading out there out west to USC. And, as much, there's a whole lot of discounting of USC this year. I got a feeling that they're going to be a little bit better than everybody suspects. I do want to see Drew Aller go out and throw for 500 yards against them. Drew Aller, I think, has turned the corner, and I think he is ready to absolutely blow up this year, throwing to Julian Fleming. Rooting for Julian Fleming, though I did not like seeing him in the Penn State uniform. I thought before I would root for him a little bit harder until I saw him in the Penn State uniform, and then it kind of like irritated me a little bit. But a Buckeye who's very well respected by everybody on the team, a guy like G. Scott, like everybody loves Julian Fleming in the program. So, I'm going to root for him. And number 25, Iowa at Ohio State. This one, you never know. They got a hell of a defense. It might be a little exciting for a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and put the bonus, number 26, Nebraska at Ohio State. Nebraska comes in. They could be undefeated. And if they are, that's going to be an incredibly exciting game. And that concludes my 25 most interesting and exciting games to me. So we're waiting to see how the Buckeyes are going to fill out that 4th spot at wide receiver in the class of 2025 to join Bodpin Miller, Des Jones, and Quincy Porter. We've got Philip Bell's decision coming on August 31st. So Philip Bell's decision on August 31st, we'll go live for that decision. Philip Bell will be on a yacht, so hopefully the stream works. And we'll go live for that decision and see whether or not he chooses Ohio State or USC. Depending on his decision, we'll see how hard Brian Hartline ends up needing to go after Jerome Myles. Jerome Myles, the 5-star out of Utah that he recently offered after he decommitted from Ole Miss. And Jerome Myles had some things to say today. Jerome Myles confirmed that he will make his decision on October 30th. And right now, this is a quote, "My final 2 are Utah and Ohio State." Fantastic news for the number 8 wide receiver and the number 42 overall prospect for On3, a 5-star everywhere else, but he's the top prospect in the state of Utah, and Utah has the edge, according to Myles, because they're the hometown team, and he would get to play with his high school quarterback. Ohio State has the development and the culture. Now, because of that statement that Utah has the edge, because they're his hometown team, Steve Wiltfong put in an RPM for Utah. This is obviously nothing that is insurmountable for Brian Hartline, that Utah is currently the hometown team. If Philip Bell does not commit to Ohio State, if he chooses to stay out at USC, out in California, then I think we'll see Hartline go full court press on Jerome Myles and have a really good shot until the other finalists get in there and start throwing around a big bag. And when you talk about the end of the class, this is the last big dog out there at wide receiver. And you look at a team like Texas A&M and Georgia, who's in on it. I don't think Georgia's a real threat because they're not going to come in with a big bag, but Texas A&M will. And then it's going to come down to, does he want to play with Brian Hartline in Ohio State and be that kind of wide receiver? Or is he confident enough in his ability that he thinks he's going to go to the NFL as high as he wants to go, no matter where he goes? And in that case, he's maybe going to choose Texas A&M in the bag. I mean, he likes Texas A&M, but Ohio State, I don't think, is going to fund what it's going to take to compete with them for a wide receiver in this particular class. And Bill Kurlick of Bucknuts must have wanted to cheer up some Buckeye fans when we're talking about offensive line recruiting, and he went ahead and got a hold of Maxwell Riley. Maxwell Riley, the number 1 rated prospect in Ohio in the class of 2026, one of the Ohio 4, 6'5". He's a 5-star. His dad's 6'8", so we think he's probably going to grow into real true tackle size, and he's a stud out of Avon. And he said that he talks to Justin Fry 3 times a week. Bill made sure to include that. Even that he talked to him most recently on Sunday. So wanted to make sure he got that one in there. And that's good news for the Buckeye fans. We like that he's talking to Max Riley. He visited Ohio State not too long ago, and he's going to visit again on his officials. I think Ohio State, Clemson, Missouri, Alabama, and Michigan State. So good news on the Maxwell Riley front, which is definitely a recruitment that we cannot lose in that class of 2026. Juck. All right, let's get to some of the comments today, guys. Suckeye fans cried all last year because UM hadn't played anyone. And now the Suckeyes have an equally soft schedule. Let's hear all the same crying this year relative to your own schedule. You're not hypocrites, right? The Buckeyes' schedules suck, and we hate it. We wanted to play Washington, but that didn't happen because they joined the Big Ten. But it wasn't Suckeye fans crying about your schedule, bonehead. The rest of college football was crying about your schedule as well. I put out a poll about the Block O, and everybody nailed it at 46% for Cody Simon. Congratulations, Juckeyes. You nailed it. Juck him out. Check him out. As an adverb is available. I believe my grammar is correct there. I had to juck out Will Howard's highlight film. Did you juck out that catch by Emeka? I don't know. Just made that up. All right, Smitty. I can get with it. We have found the very first nice USC fan, Carl Soriano, 187. Holy, oh, geez. Right as I say it, I notice he's got 187 in his name. A typical USC fan. Never mind. Just subscribed, like the Trojan helmet, after my suggestion to include it in your podcast. I'm really excited about Ohio State and USC historical history. Now it can be yearly. I'm sure Ohio State is excited about some real competition besides Michigan and Penn State. True blue blood on blue blood competition. Fight on. And our pal down here says, a nice USC fan, Juck, is that a first? Yes, it actually is. It is a first. The first one I've come across since they've joined the Big Ten, who has been interesting, insightful, and polite. Welcome, Carl Soriano, 187, to the Juckeye crew. I usually say USC fans are not welcome, but you, sir, are welcome. And yes, we are looking forward to some better competition. Dr. Nance says the original agreement with the wife, that's Nina, was 3 shows a week. Doc, it was. We have swindled her into a couple extras. We got 5 now. She's a very understanding and loving wife, and sitting right over there. First, if you've ever thought to yourself, boy, that Juck, I'd love to have a Diet Pepsi with him one day, you can do that. This Friday, Yogi's at Hard Road. I'm going to be at the Menace to Sports live show with Chris and Zach, and you and I can have us a Diet Pepsi together. So if you'd like to come to the live show this Friday, Yogi's on Hard Road, I'll be there. Me and my oldest son will be there. I'll have a Diet Pepsi with you, and we can shoot the breeze about whatever it is you like, because I promise you, I'm way more fun unedited. All right, guys, that'll do me for it. Appreciate you all so much for joining me. Please do subscribe and like the video. That would be just fantastic. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who is Juck?
Juckonbucks.
Juckonbucks. Juckonbucks?
Juck.
Juckonbucks.
My guy, Juck.
Juckonbucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
Juckonbucks.
Okay. Juck is junk.
The Juckeyes.
The Juckeyes.
Juckonbucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk. Juck.